Let's get hyped! For the first time in HypeCast history, there's a bowl game. And we are so hyped, we didn't even get a special guest. Welcome in. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Brian Christopherson, Michael Bruntz. We're Husker247. This is a HypeCast. It's designed to get you fired up for football, to get you hyped up for the Pinstripe Bowl, the Bad Boy Motors Pinstripe Bowl being played on Saturday, which is normal. So everything should feel very normal for everyone, other than this HypeCast should have been out a day earlier. But what are you going to do? So we're going to dive right into it. Brian Christopherson has been on the scene for a little bit, and we're going to go right to him. BC, kind of what's the vibe in New York City? First of all, what's the vibe for you in New York City? Have you had a bagel and lox at this point? Have you made your way to a corner store and gotten a Kaiser roll for breakfast? How's that been going? And then, of course, more importantly, what's the vibe around the team? First bowl game, first couple bowl practices.
Vibe's been good. Brunson and I had some Ray's famous pizza last night, and I mean, it was pretty good. We both thought we both gave it a thumbs up. We had that bite and looked at each other like, yeah, I don't know if it's famous, if you should say that, but it was good. So that was solid. We saw the big tree, did all that. So the vibe's been fine as far as I'm concerned. I've surprisingly made it around New York better than I think some viewers and readers would suspect I would. So that's been okay. The team itself, go ahead.
I'm going to say, do viewers and readers suspect that you wouldn't be able to make it around New York?
I think
it's those of us that have traveled with you that have more hesitation.
They might, yeah, maybe it's just people have seen me up close, like trying to board an airplane would think that. But I've made it around, and now Bruns is here to hold my hand. We're gonna make it. So
that's good.
But yeah, the team. The team's good spirits. I mean, they've had fun with it. They obviously did their Christmas Day in Central Park where they threw some snowballs and all that stuff, and that was more just a fun thing than a practice thing of any sorts. But an experience on Christmas Day to do that. Yesterday, the team, the 26th, they toured the 9/11 museum, and I know that meant a lot to some of the guys that we interviewed. It's strange to think some of those guys were barely alive or not alive when that happened, but it definitely resonated with them, what that all meant. And so that was something special for them. And then watch some of the, there was a practice yesterday at Fordham University. Team seems pretty loose for this game. I think there's a lot of young guys you can tell that are fired up in different roles that have been elevated for them. The defense itself, I think people should still expect to look pretty similar with a lot of the main faces, like 9 of the 11 guys probably are your normal dudes. But there are going to be more snaps for like a Vincent Shavers, for instance. I saw, Donovan Jones. You wonder if he's a guy who we've heard about impressing, maybe get some reps or some of those young guys as backup. So, that part will be interesting to watch, and Heinrich Harburg at tight end will be interesting too, as he's worked more into that during this bowl season.
Bruntz, before we dive into kind of specifically on offense, specifically on defense, those sorts of things, I want to just kind of get an overview. Who is not going to be available or playing for Nebraska on Saturday? Obviously, the guys that have gone into the portal, most notably of that is your Jamari Butler, Mekhi Bayer, James Williams. But there's a few people that have opted not to play in this bowl game that are still on the roster, but are either having off-season surgery or just trying to stay as healthy as possible for a senior showcase. Can you kind of run through where things are at? Who are the notables that won't be available for Nebraska on Saturday?
Yeah, Micah Mazuka is not available. He had labrum surgery like really close to the end of the regular season. I think it was a couple of days after the Iowa game. So he's not available. Isaiah Naylor is focusing on the NFL draft and is not going to play. So I would expect to see a lot of Jalen Lloyd in his place. And I'm blanking on who the third one is.
Well, Tommy Hill's been out for a little
and
while.
Tommy Hill's the third one, who, I mean, basically has been done since the Wisconsin game. So, that's Nebraska's kind of had to deal with that quite a bit this season. So Mazuka is probably the most notable loss there, just because he had been basically splitting reps at left tackle with Gunnar Gatula. There's some question about whether, or at least seems to be some question from the Boston College folks about, whether their big pass rusher, I'm terrible at pronouncing it.
You're fine.
Iziraku, whether or not he's going to play. So we'll see what kind of happens with that. We're supposed to hear from Rule and Bill O'Brien here in a little bit, but that could be potentially noteworthy. But those are the three big ones. And then, of course, everybody that went in the portal is not part of the bowl trip. So especially on defense and that defensive line, things are going to look significantly different on Saturday in that game.
Worth mentioning, because I ran through some of the guys on defense, Dante Dowdell won't be part of this as well. So a lot of Emmett Johnson on Saturday. And is there a running back, either one of you? I mean, I'll just kind of throw it to the hotel room there. Is there a running back that one of you guys would expect to kind of step into, not necessarily what Dante Dowdell did, but could step up and take some of those reps? Because I can't imagine it's going to be Emmett Johnson for 30 carries on Saturday.
Well, I think the second guy would be Ramir, and his send off, and his legs look.
He's
live.
healthy. He's good to go. Everything's set.
It looks
for
like
Ramir.
he is. It looks like he is, and I really hope that's the case, that he can have a strong send off. Obviously, he's stuck with it, and this would be a good way to finish. The other guy you mentioned is Quentin Ives, who got brought up by Dana Holgerson as having good bowl practices. So I guess he would be like the third element of that that you could see. Those are the main names. I think Emmett and Ramir, Johnson and Johnson probably is what will carry the day in this game. And that's probably enough. But, Emmett, I think, is riding really high right now after what he did those final 3 games. There was such confidence in just not only what he was doing individually, but how he fits within the offense and how Dana uses him. I think he sees the picture really well of what can be. And so I think he's one of the most exciting guys in this game. He's got the most momentum of about anybody, and he will get a ton of touches, I'm sure. Maybe not 30, but I bet he gets 20 to 25. I wouldn't be surprised about that.
All right, let's do it. Let's just dive into the offensive side of the ball. I'm going to ask these guys a couple questions each, and we will walk through what is going to be just a fascinating game on Saturday. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I find myself really curious by what it's all going to look like. All right, we'll go to Michael Bruntz for this one. We're going to start, as we often do, with Dylan Raiola. Bruntz, I think one of the discussed, but maybe kind of underreported, not for the lack of attempts, but largely because it wasn't going to be said by anyone over there. Dylan Raiola was banged up throughout the year. There's no question about that. And obviously we know he got knocked out of the UCLA game and all of that. What do you think the last few weeks, just in terms of not having day-to-day football grind, having kind of the bowl schedule and allowing himself to rest up, what do you think that could mean for him physically on Saturday? Because we really haven't seen 100% Dylan Raiola since like Northern Iowa, Illinois, maybe.
I was thinking it was the Illinois game when he kind of had that awkward ankle thing
That seems right.
that he started having to fight a little bit. I think a month off is good for him. I think mentally too, just having a month off to do nothing but kind of game plan and get to know Dana Holgerson, I think is a huge benefit as well. I mean, you think about it, during the bye week, Holgerson comes in like middle of that week. He starts, he's the guy, like he accepts the job. He's kind of game planning an offense that's not really his. He's having to learn the verbiage and checks and calls and what things are and all that stuff. And I think just having kind of the opportunity to pause a little bit and get on the same page and not have the pressure of having to immediately game plan for a game, I think is huge for Dylan. I think it's huge for the offense. I think it's huge for Dana. So, I mean, I'm not expecting a huge wholesale change of like what the offense is going to look like in this game, but I think that there's at least been enough time to probably add some new wrinkles that were not in the offense the last time we saw Nebraska against Iowa. So, I mean, I'm expecting a good, efficient game from Dylan. I think at times it looked pretty good over the last 3 games, guys running open. I think having a little bit more of a focused, look at the run game, I think will be good too. Because I think over the final 3 games, I think the running game's improvement was probably not talked about enough. And I think something like that can really benefit a young quarterback. So I'm expecting the offense to come out and look pretty good in this one. I mean, I think of the 2 sides, I'm most intrigued to see that group play, especially given that they've had a month to kind of get ready for this, and also where they have 9-10 developmental type practices in Lincoln before they even got here. So I think there's we talk about how important those bowl practices are. I mean, that's the benefit right there. It is basically getting a 2/3 of a spring ball before you even get to the bowl site.
BC, we mentioned Micah Mazuka out off-season surgery, and obviously he's moving on to the NFL after that. But what are your thoughts on where things sit for Nebraska's offensive line? Last game of a long career for Bryce Benhart, Ben Scott, final game for him. And then you've got the other side of it where you have Gunnar Gatula just kind of scratching the surface of the start of his Nebraska career over these last 6-7 games. What kind of stands out for you as you look at this offensive line? Where are they sort of at as a group? And is anybody, in a position to kind of propel themselves forward using this bowl game maybe as a start?
No, I actually don't think so. I mean, aside from like Gunnar Gatula, who's already played, a healthy number of snaps, I feel like it'll be the main 5 we've seen, because Gatula and Mazuka have kind of moved in and out a little bit. But Gatula Evans, Scott, Latovsky. I mean, Latovsky and Evans, I think, have come on. And that they've been a big part of what Bruns was speaking of the last 3 games. I think you're starting to feel better about them in the interior going forward. But Dana Holgerson was blunt about it during a press conference like a week ago, and we've seen it through the portal movement of them trying to get guys and still after certain guys, including the big man from Washington State who they've been after. But they do need to add a couple, and if they can add, maybe, I don't know how many, if it's 2 with 3, but at least 2 guys to go with what they have, I think they feel pretty comfortable with that. But there's going to be needed probably be a couple additions. And then you need guys really in their 3rd year, once they get to that point, to start to kind of take off. And whether they're a starter, they at least need to be kind of pushing that too deep, because they kind of get to that point where it has to happen. I thought Rule had a really good comment recently about that, though. He's like, you can't judge a lineman until like that 3rd year at least. It takes time for them to grow. We've always said that, but sometimes we lose sight of that in this age where it's like we want it now. It's never been a position, as long as I've covered the team, even before the portal, where you just expected a guy his 1st or 2nd year to play on the offensive line. So we do have to remember that there are guys like Sam Sludge and Jason Machachek and Brock Knutson, who could all like make a move here. And these bowl practices, even though we might not see them Saturday in this very game, have been probably important to them, and maybe some guys have gained confidence through them.
This is going to be for both of you, and Bruns can answer first, so BC gets a slight edge in terms of coming up with a different name than Bruns will. But who's a guy, and we run through some of the deeper cut names, but who's a guy that you think maybe pops up in this game, plays a little bit that we haven't seen, or someone who takes advantage of, like an Isaiah Nair is out, or Dante Dowdell is out. So we'll start with Michael Bruns, just offensive side of the ball. We're going to do the same thing on defense, I'm sure. But player or two that you think has an opportunity more in this game because of the circumstances of the portal and the player movement than maybe what they had other times this season.
Yeah, offense is a little well, I don't think that there's going to be anybody like completely new. The only guy I can think of that might get in there a little bit that we haven't seen because he traveled late in the year is Quinn Clark at wide receiver. Like I'm assuming that Lloyd's just going to slide in pretty effortlessly for Nair. I could see kind of somebody like Quinn Clark maybe getting in there. I do think I'm kind of previewing one of my answers for later, but the tight end position is going to look different with Nate Borkacher moving on. Thomas Fedoni got a lot of credit from Dana Holgerson for his work in the bowl practices, but I think the player that probably stands to benefit the most from the portal movement, I'll say, is Luke Lindenmeyer. Like I think Dana Holgerson really likes him. You saw him a lot more in those two tight end sets where it was Borkacher and Lindenmeyer late in the season. So I think you'll see a good amount of him in this game, which I think Nebraska is going to have to be able to run the ball against Boston College. I mean, it feels like it's going to be more of a Nebraska-Iowa type game than anything. So I'll go, my answer after talking through it is Lindenmeyer. I think he's going to have a bigger role in this game.
BC, is there anyone you would like to add? I know, again, we've talked about a few of these names, but anybody you'd like to add or anyone you want to go into more detail on?
On the defensive side,
just offense. Just stay
on offense. No, offense. I think Bruns nailed it pretty well. I don't think this game itself on that side of the ball, you're going to just the viewer is going to automatically be able to pick up on like, oh, this guy came out of nowhere. I don't think that's going to happen on that side. I don't even think it'll happen as much on the defensive side. I know we're not there yet, but just in general, making the point, I don't think after processing in the last couple of weeks, it's going to be as much during this particular game of oh man, I can't believe this whole unit is looking completely different. I don't think that'll happen on Saturday.
Well, let's switch over to the defensive side. And obviously a lot of change, a lot of upheaval. We did this kind of with the offense. We'll go back to Bruns for it. A couple guys that we won't be seeing on Saturday. That includes James Williams, Jamari Butler. Who else? Mekhi Bayer. Is there anyone beyond those three that saw a fair amount of time that won't be part of this?
Stephon Thompson. Yeah, that would be one. The rotational use is going to be kind of interesting to watch because I think, especially at linebacker and defensive end or defensive line, like you're going to have Nash and Ty. I'll just talk about defensive line, and you can take linebackers if you want, BC. But like defensive line, I think it's going to be more of guys that towards the end of the season we're not seeing a lot of snaps. I mean, Cam Linhart actually played very little over the last couple games relative to kind of what I think people think he is within the defense. So I think you'll see more of him. I think you'll have to see more of Keona Davis. I think he only played 90 snaps this year, but the bulk of them were in the last 3 or 4 games. So I think he's going to have to be more of a piece, rotational piece for Nebraska in this game. And the other one, by the way, Riley Van Poppel, who is going to get to play in this game because the bowl doesn't count towards the redshirt number. So, it's a little bit of a preview of aside from Ty and Nash, what that defensive line is going to look like next year. So I'm eager to see kind of how that plays out. But I mean, I would expect you'll see a lot of Cam Linhart, a lot of Keona Davis, and I think that's going to be the biggest change up front. And no James Williams, so you're going to have somebody that can get after the quarterback on their own probably too.
PC, if you could just kind of walk through similar linebackers, what that situation looks like without Mekhi Bayer involved.
Well, I just think there's going to be a whole lot of Vincent Shavers. Just by far the most snaps we've seen from him. To go with Bullock and Javen Wright's still there, so you do have. I just think it's a situation where like you take your main 3 or 4 and they probably just play, so much of this game. And that was the point I was kind of making earlier. I don't think there's just going to be like some guy necessarily out of nowhere. And even the guys Brunts was mentioning on the D line, they're like names who've kind of been in the mix, but now it's just like elevated a little bit. But if you wanted someone that's on the 2 deep that like wasn't talked about throughout the season, like Dylan Rogers was on the 2 deep at linebacker. Like Jacob Bauer could be a guy like who's been a walk on who could pop in there. I mean, there's that's it. Gage Stenger, like names like that are guys who, one of them could pop in and get some reps. I just think though they'll stick with more of guys playing probably a lot more of the percentage of snaps than maybe they have during the season, if that makes sense. And you know how it's been such a rotation heavy defense the last 2 years with 20 some guys. Maybe this is a case where certain guys play like 75, 80% of the snaps now, as opposed to some games when it was 50%, that kind of thing.
Brunt, I know you were traveling yesterday, so you probably didn't watch or see any of the bowl action, but scoring explosion kind of throughout a lot of those games. You mentioned something earlier, and I just kind of want you to kind of delve into it a little bit. What stands out for you as to why you think this is going to look more like Nebraska, Iowa, than perhaps some of the sort of more wide open lack of defense we've seen in some of these other bowl games so far?
Yeah, I just stylistically, I think I'm not expecting 13-10, but I mean, I think it's going to be, the way that Bill O'Brien runs his offense. It's a lot of running. It's play action. It's kind of the window dressing stuff.
Grinded out football.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that that's going to change too much for the bowl game. Nebraska's going to try to throw it. I think the weather's supposed to be okay here on Saturday. So, I mean, I think they're going to do what they're going to do, but I could see a situation where this is a very the more likely scenario in my mind is more of kind of a defensive heavy grinded out type game rather than like the 5 overtime or 2 or 3 overtime thing they had in Hawaii the other night with San Jose State and UCF. And who was it last night? It was we were watching it in Times Square as
it was Bowling Green
yeah,
and Arkansas State.
Yeah. Butch Jones in Times Square as it was meant to be. So, I think I would lean more towards a lower scoring type game.
Last thing for you here at BC. Has anyone asked Matt Rule if they went and sought a waiver for Kevin Gallick so they could have snaps on Saturday?
Has been asked. I mean, obviously that's a big part of this, though. It's like the Iowa game in many ways you could say was settled because you couldn't snap it correctly to your place kicker. So you just hope on those few times or whatever it happens that it's on target. And I know those guys. Obviously, they work a long time to do it right, and it has to kill them when they don't. It's probably more of a mental thing than anything, though, in overcoming it in a game setting. We've seen this in sports. It's like Chuck Knobloch throwing to first base, at some point, like it gets in your head a little bit, and it's tough to shake that. So hopefully the time away for a few weeks is let a guy or two over there who's doing it clear their heads and maybe perform at a good level this final time.
All right, let's dive into the prediction part of the show. We'll start with the oddly specific prediction, and we will go with Michael Brunts for his bowl game oddly specific prediction.
I've thought about this one a lot, and I think what you're going to see, I think you're going to see 2 touchdown passes from Dylan Raiola. I think they're going to both go to tight ends, and they're going to go to different tight ends. I think you're going to get a Thomas Fidone touchdown catch, his first of the season, happening in Yankee Stadium. And I think you're going to get Luke Lindenmeyer catching a touchdown pass in Yankee Stadium. I think the Fidone one's going to be, I'm going to say it feels like 12 yards. It's what's out there, what I'm feeling. 12 yards to Fidone, 18 to Lindenmeyer, where somehow he just gets lost in the formation. Boston College doesn't know where he is. And then all of a sudden he's got the ball and he's running into the end zone. And we get one of the two tight ends, not both, but one, gives us a celebration, a swing, a baseball bat swing to celebrate the touchdown. So that's my prediction in this one.
A little Alfred Morris action for those
Yes.
that remember the
Smith,
old Washington running back.
Neil Smith, maybe.
Okay.
Yes.
I should have went first. I should have known not to allow you the opportunity to take away a Thomas Fidone touchdown prediction that I had, but I'm gonna let you have that one. We're gonna move on to our second prediction. Nebraska on defense will sack Boston College on each of its first two offensive possessions. The Huskers will have sacks on the first two offensive possessions for Boston College. The first sack, MJ Sherman gets home. First possession, you get an MJ Sherman sack. Second sack, it's a half sack for Riley Van Poppel and a half sack for, let's see, where do we want to go with this? Ty Robinson. They meet in the middle. They're both in there. I'm not sure what that formation exactly looks like or whatever, but they're both in there. They each get a half sack. Nebraska with a couple sacks early. They work over that Boston College offensive line. Brian Christopherson, what do you got?
Jalen Lloyd is going to it's going to happen. I think I've predicted this on other ones, but we got to finish the year with one, and it's going to happen. Jalen Lloyd is going to hit on that. Like, it's going to be 61 yards for a touchdown. Just going to run past the defense. It's going to be a pretty ball. Maybe just slightly behind him, has to hold up just a second, gives a DB a chance to kind of come back in at the last second, make a change, but he can't recover. Jalen gets it, kind of keeps his feet and goes the last 15 yards into the end zone for a 61-yard touchdown. So that's one of the scores. And also Ramir Johnson is going to get in the end zone. I think there'll be a dedicated push, let's say it's a 3-yard touchdown run. It'll be around the end zone, and they're going to get Ramir in there, and he's going to wiggle in for a score, and it's going to be a very triumphant moment.
All right. I'm surprised that you opted to go away from the block punt one. That you've used that one several times, and they've come very close to.
I was trying to put a period on the end of the sentence. I know I've done the Jalen Lloyd one a lot. I'll get new material next year.
That's okay.
But I felt like it's like a movie or a book where you have to tie it together at the ending, and so that's it.
All right. Picks to click on Saturday. I'm going to start so I don't have another situation like the oddly specific prediction one. A guy we haven't mentioned. No one said his name. We're nearly 29 minutes in by the time we get the intro into this. Ja'Cory Barney, I think, is going to have a pretty good game on Saturday. And so looking to see Ja'Cory Barney in an offense where Dana Holgorsen has had more time to kind of put some stuff together. You might have some specific plays to kind of free him up, and you can utilize him around the line of scrimmage, and you can utilize him downfield. And Ja'Cory Barney's good at both. You can hand him the ball. You can throw him the ball. He can even throw the football, which we haven't seen yet this year. So Ja'Cory Barney, my pick to click for the Pinstripe Bowl. BC.
Cam Lenhart, sort of a return home for him too, as Bruns mentioned, a lot more snaps. I just think there's going to be a lot of motivation playing in front of family and friends. He gets a lot done. I feel like I've been all over the place because I've kind of said, there's not going to be a big deal of where a viewer is going to notice, just like a complete makeover. But there are those parts that are definitely going to be different of guys like him who maybe we're only getting like 8 to 10 snaps. So that's sort of the happy medium of all that. I don't know which of the young guys in the secondary are going to play necessarily or at all, but Cam Lenhart is going to get reps, and I think he'll do well in his return home.
Michael Brown, where are you going with your pick to click?
I almost did this for my oddly specific prediction, and I'm slightly kicking myself that I did not. But Brian's Ramir Johnson touchdowns kind of put this in my head. Ty Robinson is going to be my pick to click. I think this is a game that he has wanted and talked about for a long time. He wanted to get to a bowl game. It means a lot to him. He didn't opt out. And I mean, he's ringing the bell on Wall Street today. Lots of good things are happening for Ty. I think he's going to have a great game defensively. I'm wondering, and I have no reason to think this or whatever, but it feels like everything with the Ty Robinson lead blocking thing has been setting up for a Ty Robinson fullback dive plunge into the end zone. So I think he's going to have a great game defensively. I think he's also going to have something to say on offense, whether it's a big block for Ramir Johnson, whether Nebraska hands him the ball, to kind of get into the rugby pile. But I think he plays a great game in his final one as a Nebraska player.
Could it be a thing where they do the play action and he just open in the flats and he rumbles in for 2 yards?
I like it. And then after he scores, he gets to put on Babe Ruth's jersey in the end zone. Somebody rushes out, gives him the Babe's jersey, and he puts it on over his pads for celebration.
I like that. For those that watched the greatest game above sports bowl game of all time, Pittsburgh ran that play that I was talking about, and their defensive lineman dropped it at like the 2 yard line, would have won them the game. Then they kicked a 19-yard field goal to go into overtime. Played 5. It was Pat Narduzzi put on a clinic of bad coaching in that game. But that defensive lineman just needed to catch a simple pass, scores the game. It would have been a great moment for fat guys everywhere, and he flubbed it. So I don't know. Maybe Matt Rule saw that, and he's going to say no, you can't throw it to Ty Robinson. But we'll see if that comes up. All right, final prediction here. Game score. I don't know what everyone else is doing. I'm just going to go ahead and get mine on the record. Nebraska 38, Boston College 20. I like points in this game. There's been a lot of points in bowl games. I don't know what it's going to look like. I think Nebraska's going to come out and play well. Like, they're healthy. They've had a lot of prep time for this. I think it probably means a little bit more to them. And so I expect Nebraska to look a little crisp early and put some points up, and Boston College to maybe snag some a little later. BC.
I'll say Nebraska 27, Boston College 17. I do think this offense is going to look pretty efficient and click better than you sometimes see in bowl games after the layoff, because I think the extra time Holgerson's had with those guys has probably been useful, and it sounds like Dana's really enjoyed those bowl practices too. And getting to know guys better and maybe what their skill sets are in certain ways, in a way he couldn't in just the 3 weeks previous. So I'll say the offense plays pretty well. Defense gets a key takeaway, and Nebraska wins by 10.
Brunch, bring us home.
Yeah, I was a similar ballpark to BC on that one. I'll say Nebraska 25, Boston College 17. I think it'll be a closer game, but I'm still not 100% ready to buy in on an offensive explosion, but I think Nebraska gets it done.
All right. That's 3 predictions for Nebraska to win the Pinstripe Bowl that everyone was hoping the Huskers would avoid. But now that you're there, you get to experience it. How many layers do each of you plan to wear in the open air press box on Saturday?
Many. I'm probably going to wear everything that I have. Gloves, hat, scarves.
Good way to save on carry-on luggage if you're flying out later.
That's true. I'm just going to be like walking down to post game like this because my arms are going to be so.
Just look like a Michelin man.
Yeah, just ready to talk to some victorious Huskers in the bowels of Yankee Stadium.
I like it. What about you, BC? Are you prepared for the open air press box?
Yeah.
You both have covered open air press box games before. I think the old Holiday Bowl in San Diego, was that open air?
Yeah. It's the first time I ever hit unmute on a conference call to say that to tell people I'll be wearing some long johns. But so that I will be doing that. So I have multiple layers ready. I'll make sure Bruns has got enough on. We'll be like each other's mother, like telling each, are you got like 3 layers up top at least, and all that. But yeah, we've been trained slightly for this because oddly enough, whenever Nebraska played in the Holiday Bowl, the weather on game day, after a beautiful week leading into it most of the time, was just a joke. Like for San Diego, it was like rainy and 40, 50 degrees. This will be colder, make no mistake, but perhaps it at least got us on the runway of taking off toward this flight and what we'll experience. So we can't complain, though. I mean, you're in Yankee Stadium, you're covering a game in New York. It's fine.
I think that's pretty accurate. No complaints here. Nebraska reaches a bowl game for the first time in a while. That game at 11 a.m. on Saturday. And of course, Husker247 will have all the coverage of that, just like it's had all the coverage of the transfer portal. A busy month of December. Things have slowed down slightly, but hey, look, Nebraska's still looking to bring in players after the bowl game. There's still going to be some movement on Nebraska's roster after the bowl game. I think you're going to see some guys head into the portal. And so there's going to be quite a bit of change and upheaval, but the one constant in your life needs to be Husker247, where we can provide all the coverage that you need for Nebraska athletics. Of course, basketball coming off of a Diamond Head Classic championship will return to action against Southern here next week, and then has a big UCLA game coming up. So BC and I will be firing up that podcast sometime soon. Of course, the Husker247 podcast will return. We'll get to normal programming as we get through the holidays. So if you're bored of spending time with your family, if you don't have any more conversations left to have with your aunts or your uncles or your cousins, just get your phone out and go antisocial and join us at Husker247.com.